I was just deep diving Julia Roberts. And then it got me thinking, like, who were the biggest stars growing up? I was born in the 80s, I mean, so I don't remember that time, but I grew up in the 90s. So the stars that I wrote down a list, I was like, who are the biggest stars? And I'm wondering, am I missing anybody? And like, who do you guys think were the biggest stars? So on my list, in the early 90s, the biggest stars were Julia Roberts, who still is a huge star, but Julia Roberts was a big star in the early 90s, as well as Tom Cruise, who I believe from the 80s over. Tom Hanks, same, 80s into the still, same with Tom Cruise, still a big star. And then also Meg Ryan, late 80s into the 90s, was a big star. And then I also have Arnold Schwarzenegger, and then at the beginning of the 90s into like, early 1000 maybe, and then nowadays, big break, Winona Ryder. Those are my big early 90s stars, right? So then I moved into the mid 90s, and I'm like, my biggest stars were like Keanu Reeves, Speed. That's what I think of when I think of Keanu. And then, of course, late 90s, he's still a star. Demi Moore, I knew she was big in the 80s, but Striptease, I think, was the big one. Sandra Bullock, I think, blew up in the mid 90s and has been a huge star since. Drew Barrymore, probably as a kid, and then I feel like in the late 90s was when she had like Never Been Kissed and stuff, and that's when she became a big star to me. Cameron Diaz, Phil with The Mask, but really around, what was it, 97, I think, for There's Something About Mary. I feel like that's where she became a huge star. Jim Carrey with Ace. Oh, mid 90s. These are my mid 90s still. Eddie Murphy, I know he was big in the 80s, but he was still big for me in the mid 90s. Patrick Swayze. I have Brad Pitt, but I feel like he really got bigger, like kind of late 90s. I know he's early 90s, but for me, like late 90s, really moving into the 90s, late 90s with like Meet Joe Black. And then Hugh Grant was huge with Four Weddings and a Funeral. And then moving into my late 90s, the people I feel like, even lots of those people are still big stars, all of them are. These stars kind of came out in the late 90s. Matt Damon, Gwyneth Paltrow, Ben Affleck, Adam Sandler, and Chris Farley. I feel like late 1995 and then on Will Smith, because of first his show and then the movies. And then Martin Lawrence was really big in the late 90s, I believe. George Clooney, I think that's when he started getting really bigger. For me, Alicia Silverstone, because of Clueless, she was big for me, but maybe not everybody. I have no idea. And then J-Lo. I think that's when she kind of took off. But like, just when it comes to like movies, these are the people I'm thinking of that were the biggest stars. Am I missing people? Like, who would you add to the 90s list? And if you want to know who I think the 2000s got taken over, let me know. And the teens, and then maybe even the 2020s. I feel like stars are like a lot less now, but yeah, let me know.